Hi, I'm Randall from Randall's ESL Cyber Listening Lab, providing tips on language learning, culture, and human development. And I think one of the greatest goals of any English learner or teacher, in fact, is the ability to speak more naturally, more fluently, with more poise, and just the ability to speak with confidence. And I think this is particularly true when people realize, especially language learners, that their accent could affect their educational studies and their professional career. Well, fortunately, in this episode, I'm joined by Peter Kaufman, who relates his past experiences as an acting coach and now as a fluency specialist in helping people reduce their accents. So let me go ahead and bring on today Peter. Welcome to the broadcast.
Hey, Randall, it's great to be here.
It's certainly a pleasure to have you on the episode, and certainly we're welcoming those that are joining from Mexico. Welcome, Tutor Joe from Costa Rica. Hello. Again, Joe and Shushanik from Armenia are joining us, and again, people from Peru. So again, we have a large audience that are going to join us from around the world, and we're just excited about that. Well, Peter, let's just get into the broadcast today because everyone's wanting to know, okay, what are the keys to better a more fluent English pronunciation? And in the show links, we also have information about your free online course of how to speak like a native in 3 weeks. And we'll talk about what that means. So if you could just go ahead, Peter, and introduce yourself so that the audience could get to know you better.
Hey, Randall, thanks for that introduction. And so, first of all, my name, Peter Kaufman, as you, that's my name, and I'm from New York, although my background is, my family is from Europe. And as we'll get into later, there's that will come into my story as to why I ended up in Europe where I am right now. So I'm currently in Kiev, Ukraine. I've been here for 2 years. And what I do is I work with people who are doing their professional career in English, and I help them do it better, feel more confident, get better results, get new types of clients, get new types of people into their network, into their social circle, because COVID has really flattened the world. And really, no matter where you are, if you have an internet connection, you really can branch out to anyone in the world and do anything that you're prepared for. So I help people more through a mindset gap of really embracing all of that potential. And the means I use to get them there is through more body-based techniques. So I work a lot with the bodily implications of speaking, because pronunciation is physical and your accent is physical. And a lot of that is taken from my career as an acting coach, as we'll get into later.
Yeah, let's lead into that. That's a great introduction.
Yeah.
I appreciate you kind of talking of the background of your own approach. And let's talk and dive in just a little bit more about your background. You're originally from New York, and then you left. And where did your life take you? And we'll tie this into your experience as an acting coach, how that's related to fluency and your current profession.
Exactly. Thanks for that question. So I ended up, when I was in university, I first came to Budapest, Hungary. Now, my family is from Budapest, my grandfather and his cousins. So I ended up there partially because my family was there, partially because there was a good program there to learn from, and partially because I just wanted to see a different part of the world. So this was 9 years ago. Hungary was still very much part of the post-Soviet world. It was very different than New York, and I wanted to see something different. And when I got there, it completely changed my attitude on life. I really fell in love with the culture, and I ended up moving there for 7 years.
And this will probably lead into the next part of the broadcast. But keeping in mind that the title of the broadcast is keys to better and more fluent English pronunciation. For those teachers that are watching or students, what are some of your concerns that we might be able to address in terms of speaking better, having greater fluency, speaking more naturally, different techniques that you can use in the classroom? So feel free to share those questions and comments as we get into that part of the broadcast. So let's talk about your career path, because most people just don't uproot themselves and go to a new country for a few years.
Yeah, I love that question. So I actually come from a finance background. I was working on Wall Street. I was doing something called arbitrage trading, and I was programming. I was doing mathematical modeling, and it was fun. I mean, it's an exciting career. To see, to really be at the heart of the global finance system is actually a thrill. However, I didn't really like how it felt. I didn't really like the social circle. I didn't really like the creative outlook. So I ended up, as a hobby, starting learning improvisation comedy. I studied at an amazing theater called the Magnet Theater in New York. And it basically, like, it was an explosion inside of me, right? For the first time, I was exploring my creativity, and I ended up deciding that I wanted to leave finance and for a while just travel. I was just traveling, and I ended up in St. Petersburg, Russia. Okay. And when I was in St. Petersburg, I met a man named Sergey, and Sergey said to me, well, he was also in improvisation, which is how we met. And he said to me, "Oh, like, you're from New York? You should teach. Like, teach us on Monday. I'll get you students. You teach." I'm like, "Sergey, I've taken like 6 classes. What do I know?" He's like, "No, you're from New York. You teach us."
So this was well before you were even thinking about being an English teacher or anything like that.
I was just having fun. I was in Russia trying not to get killed. I was like in Russia just trying to enjoy my life. And excuse me. And all of a sudden I was a teacher. I was not just a teacher, but I was teaching a master class. And I mean, the 2 days leading up to that was like the most nervous I've ever been in my life, but I ended up being very natural at it. It just came very naturally to me. So I ended up deciding to make a career out of it.
What was this master class? For those that are watching, again, someone asked you to do a master class, and we're going to show a few pictures here in a minute. But what was that master class that led you into improvisation and acting?
I taught it was basically about storytelling on stage and how to use your voice to say one thing and mean something else.
Okay.
Which is, when we get to later, it is still at its core something I talk about in my fluency training. It's emotional expression. It's how to use your voice to amplify what you're saying, because communication is about meaning. It's not logical meaning. There's emotional flavor to everything. And this workshop I ended up teaching was about how to say a lot with a little, how to use your voice to mean things you're not actually saying. I could talk about that forever.
Well, let's talk. Again, we have some other comments coming in of people just saying hello. Paul from Costa Rica, Mona from Tunisia, again, different from Vietnam. And many of these people are probably wondering, how is this connected? This idea of transformation from the financial world to improvisation to speech fluency. We're going to be evolving our conversation in that. But as part of that, let's take a look at some of these pictures, that period in your life where you were doing improvisation and how that was connected to speech fluency and so forth.
Yeah, so this picture right here is from 3 years ago. Actually, almost exactly 3 years ago today. This was one of my groups. We do like 8-week introduction classes, or we did. And then at the end, there was a graduation show. So this was immediately after this class's graduation show. So you can see, I didn't have a beard back then. I'm kind of in the middle in the gray shirt without a beard. So like everyone on the bottom 2 rows were in the show, and then everyone on the top 2 rows were fans, audience members, friends, family. So you can see we really created this international like community center in Budapest. It was unbelievable. Yeah.
So describe this improvisation. When people hear of improvisation, they might not fully capture the idea behind it.
Improvisation is basically what we're doing right now. It's having a conversation without a script. Okay. And improvisation as an art form was doing that on stage in front of people. And most of the time it becomes comedy. Most of the time improvisation is about making people laugh. But the way I taught it was more about how do you just get on stage and be yourself? Because it turns out if your authenticity is so rare in modern society that if you just if you're on stage and you're authentic, you're so much more interesting than if you're telling jokes. And that became sort of acting, not as acting, but as self-development, as building yourself a better life, and as sort of communication on the day-to-day level, right? Like, again, this is improvisation. Me and Randall haven't scripted this conversation. We've met, we've chatted, but we don't have a plan here. We're just talking, and that's how most of life is. And when you're really comfortable doing that, you start to be able to pick up on new opportunities. Right. You start to think bigger. As we get later in the discussion, maybe talking about the pandemic, it's what prepares you for these situations. It's why I think I was so very adept at reorganizing my business for COVID, because you just have that instinct of taking a deep breath and saying, what do I have here? What can I use in my environment to improve the situation? And so I taught it as self-development, and then it became the core of how I teach fluency.
Okay, so let's lead into that. First of all, the last comment about this improvisation group. What was your role within the group? What was your designation, you could say? Were you a member of this group? And
I would say director.
Okay.
So I was teaching. I was CEO, director, teacher, founder. Like it was basically like my community and my courses. Yeah. And I didn't perform much. When I moved to Ukraine, I started performing much more. But mostly in Budapest, I was behind the scenes, and I was more like you're doing now. I was making sure everyone else looks good. That was sort of my role.
Well, let's lead into the next part. And again, if you're a teacher, a language learner out there that is wondering or has concerns about your own fluency, about your own pronunciation, as a teacher, what can I do to improve my own pronunciation? Because Peter, there are many teachers that feel a lack of confidence in their own ability to project, to have confidence. If you're a teacher that has some of those concerns, feel free to share your comments and some of the things that you're doing in the classroom to increase pronunciation, because the next question we're going to go on to. So from improvisation, acting, to speech fluency training, how did that transition work? And we're speaking before the pandemic. Can you talk about your transition into teaching, into fluency training? And then we're going to get into some specifics.
Awesome. Love that question. So as with everything, the switch initially happened because I was broke. At first, it was simply acting, personal development can be a very good business, but it also can be very difficult. So I was, I made some bad business decisions, and I got into English teaching as a quick way to get back on my feet. Okay. And I was on this site called Preply.com. Now, Preply, by the way, a Ukrainian site. Awesome. It's Ukraine's baby. We're very proud of it here. It's basically like an Airbnb for English teachers. So you go on the site, you make a profile, you put up a video, and you set your own price. And I ended up positioning myself through my business intuition. I positioned myself very well on the site using my acting background, where I said, look, like if you're B2 plus, like if you're IELTS 6.5, 7 plus, right? When you start talking, it's not so much about what you know, it's about how you say it.
Okay.
That was my big pitch. In business, it's not what you say, but how you say it. And so I ended up using that tagline on an English teaching platform to then teach acting as English training. And over time, it kind of grew together to build a more sophisticated method for actually training fluency directly. And the methodology is more about putting fluency into the body and focusing more on. So for example, in acting, you have a character, right? If you think about a very famous character from a movie you might enjoy, right? Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, or it's Tony Stark in Avengers. I don't know, pick a favorite character, right? They have a certain physicality about them, right? There's, Iron Man is a very proud, very chest out guy. Whereas like, if you imagine like, Sam in Lord of the Rings, he's more timid. Like he has more of a closed in posture, right? So you can think of a character as a physicality, but also your voice is very determined by your physicality, which I think we'll talk about later.
Right.
So I basically started teaching accent and fluency as putting the American character into your vocal posture. So really, Americans have a certain way of talking, and it's called your vocal posture. Your vocal posture. And every culture, even every city in America, every accent has a posture associated with it. And when you start to put it into your body, well, your body goes with you 24/7, right? So it was a way to help people not think so much and really focus on English as a physical process. And then what physical tools do you need? And what is the physical toolbox of an American in particular? Because that's my specialty. And that became fluency training.
Yeah. And let's talk about this. That's a great introduction. I think, and even in seeing how you were combining your business skills, marketing skills, and your ability to combine that with teaching and pronunciation, fluency training, I think is something that often teachers lack, the ability to make those connections. And one of the things we're going to briefly talk about foreign language anxiety, because a comment just came in from Layla, and Layla said, sometimes the fear of making mistakes when we speak stop many of us to have conversations or communicate with native English speakers. What can you speak to that, Peter? The idea of fear, not just students, but teachers themselves of having great fear. What can you speak to that particular idea as it's related to foreign language anxiety?
Absolutely. This is a huge topic. First of all, Layla, you're not alone. I've worked with many very high level people who have this same problem. So it just reminds me, I was working once with a Chinese student who was a lead engineer at Google. He was working on Google at Google. And he still had this problem. He still felt only comfortable speaking in English with other non-native speakers. He had trouble speaking up at meetings if there were native speakers in the room. So it is a fundamental problem that I think we as teachers need to be more aware of it, because teachers can go a long way into solving this. Now, if you look at research, there's basically two places foreign language anxiety comes from, right? You have teacher-based foreign language anxiety, where the teacher can influence how much anxiety you feel. And then there's internal variables. Internal variables means how much of it is the student themselves, right? Now, if you think as a teacher for a second, right? You would think this means, okay, we need to be better teachers, so we deal with our half of it. And I actually don't agree with that. I think as teachers, we need to find ways to actually work with the students' inner mindset, inner narratives that are preventing them from naturally embodying that confidence when talking with native speakers. Now, here's what I mean practically. Okay, so let's say I'm talking with Randall, and Randall is a man I respect so much. Like Randall, I met because I was using his lessons to teach my students, right? Now, I could go in and think to myself, okay, Randall is a lion. He's this big leader in my field, right? And so if I make a mistake, he might eat me, right? He might be judging me. He might kick me out of this interview for all I know. You'd be surprised at the inner narratives going in some of our heads.
Right. Good point.
Yeah. And we have to reverse that narrative and be like, actually, no. The more mistakes I make, the more human I am, the more people do respect me, especially in American culture. And that's the one thing, it's sort of become a specialty of mine, specializing in Eastern Europe, where in Eastern Europe and many other countries, China, Japan, you're taught if you raise your hand in school and you're wrong, you shouldn't have said anything in the first place. Whereas in America, we're taught raise your hand and be wrong because you'll learn quicker. So actually, if you really get into your head that native speakers will actually view you higher if they see you making mistakes, will respect you more if you're making mistakes, that mistake can become not a source of anxiety, but it can become a source of enjoyment.
And
it
I
can
think
become a source of power.
And I think, Peter, it's interesting. I think a lot of teachers were thinking as they're watching this particular broadcast that you were going to initially approach it with, well, let's talk about intonation. Let's talk about vowel sounds. But you're approaching it, at least initially, in terms of poise, in terms of posture, in terms of confidence, which I think are often ideas that are relegated to a secondary level versus they're really at the forefront of what we're trying to do, it sounds like.
Absolutely. One is mindset, two is posture, and then we add tonality and even word stress. I don't want my students thinking about word stress until they have mindset and posture right, because thinking is really the enemy in a lot of cases.
So, and just so you know, Peter, we have again Violeta from Philippines. There are a variety of people from Argentina. Ahmed says, how can people learn from you online? We'll talk a little bit about the courses that you offer. And Cassia from Brazil says, respect the mistakes is so nice in the American culture. And I think that is part of humanizing this experience. Layla says, thank you for your kind and useful approach. We're going to be talking about those elements that you're discussing. And Ahmed says, I feel what you say because I'm in that same situation. And also, Violeta says, some of my students here describe speaking the English language as a nosebleed. And so I think all of these feelings that kind of tie back to the foreign language anxiety that you mentioned. And if we now, Peter, could go in to some of the common pronunciation issues that you see, keeping in mind and whatever you want to elaborate more on posture and tonality and so forth, but also some of the common pronunciation issues. And for those that are watching, whether you're a student or teacher, what are some of the issues that you see as a teacher in working with your students? And do you have any fears or concerns about teaching pronunciation in the classroom? Because I think, Peter, there are going to be some people that I just can't step into that. I'm not sure how to address it. So let's first start with common pronunciation issues and hope we have some additional questions specifically regarding this. Then we're going to talk about keys to accent reduction training. So common issues and then some approaches.
I love this topic. This is so much fun. So
great.
If I can just sneak in an answer to a secondary question you asked about teachers who might be scared to address this issue.
Right.
Oftentimes, it's the same with teachers and students. We're just missing a framework. Pronunciation, accent can seem like an overwhelming topic, but that's only because we don't know how to break it down. We don't know that there's actually science behind all of this. So by understanding, one, it doesn't come from nowhere, that there is a system behind it. And two, you can learn the system. And three, you don't have to be perfect today. You just have to slowly start to get into it. It's not so bad. So it all comes back to the tongue. The tongue is, with vowels in particular. With vowels and pronunciation, it's all the tongue. So basically each vowel is associated with a different tongue position in your mouth. For example, the very famous problem E and I, which is sheep, ship, leap, lip, and of course beach, and you know what, which is why everyone knows this one. There's two reasons why this is hard. One is most languages don't have I. It's a very Germanic. I mean, German has it, English has it, Turkish has it, but most languages actually don't have the sound, which is why it's so hard. But number two is the tongue is actually very similar. So E has the tongue at the very top of the mouth in the front, and I has it near the top, but just beneath it. And you have some tenseness in your lips. Your lips are what are called round and tense. Yeah. So you basically have three things with each vowel. You have the tongue position. Are the lips rounded or not rounded? And are they tense or not tense? So E, you can see I'm very loose, and I. You can see my muscles are tight right here. I. So maybe we'll get into it later, but this understanding there's logic behind this can help to reduce a lot of that anxiety. You just need a framework. So E and I are the two huge ones. Like every single person I talk to, that's number one. Now, there are some very common problems with bottom vowels. So bottom vowels are where your tongue is at the bottom of your mouth. Now, in English, American English particularly, the vowels are so low that you actually have to really open your jaw to hit them, which is very strange in a language like Russian, to a culture like Russia, where you really don't open your mouth at all when you speak. So even getting someone to feel like opening your mouth to say ah, that can feel emotionally so strange to a non-native speaker that they're not going, if you tell them to open their mouth, they'll just go when they really need to be going ah. So you'll get not ah. Okay? So the bottom vowels, which are and aw, those are the three bottom vowels. Those are definitely the big problems. Eastern Europeans, East Asia, mostly. Pretty much every language has some problems there. So your bottom vowels, and aw.
Okay, so vowel sounds. In addition to vowel sounds, and feel free, that's one area. Feel free also to elaborate a little bit more when you were saying in the beginning about posture, your presence, because I think that's a new concept that I think is worth elaborating on just a little bit more. So you talked about vowels, any other thing that you want to address in that realm, and then go back just briefly to what do you mean by posturing? Because I think that's a new concept for many.
Yes. Ooh. Here we go, guys. Dig in. So you're, again, we're working with muscles, okay? So your articulators are the external muscles that make the sounds, right? Your tongue and your lips, pretty much. But we also have what are called formants. These are mostly internal muscles you don't really see. And what they do is they open and reduce space in your face and your throat where the sound is vibrating. For example, my posture is very loose in the face. But if I start to tighten up these muscles up here, reducing the space, my sound is going to get higher in my face. This is called a high posture. Whereas my normal speech posture is very low. And one of the ways my body is doing that is by creating a very loose open tube to make the sound resonate in the chest, not in the cheeks up here. Now, for example, higher postures is very common in, I'm now speaking with a higher posture, by the way. This is very common in, say, Eastern Asian cultures, like Mandarin speakers often have this more high, almost nasally posture when they speak English. And that has to do with how they speak their native language. Okay? So we're looking at your general musculature as you're speaking the language. That's what posture is. I hope that helps.
No, that's great. And a couple of comments that have come in. Again, someone from Mongolia is saying hello. Violetta says, oh, I like that. You don't have to be perfect today. I think that's going back to the idea of making progress. And then Tutor Joe from Costa Rica says, Costa Rican teachers have a terrible issue about their accent. This is because academic programs at local universities are led in Spanish and not in English. Then it affects when they are teaching their pupils at school. Any suggestions?
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for that question. I would say get an accent coach. If it's an issue, fix it. It's not a little effort goes a long way in this. And if you're committed, you can make a change. And if it's systematic, where you have teachers with bad accents teaching students who have worse accents, and that's an issue for you, find the time, find a little bit of money that you can invest in it and do it. There are, in addition to good programs, there's lots of free materials. Some of the free materials are listed in the in our chat. I'm not sure where.
Yeah, in the program notes, they'll be able to see those on Facebook, a couple of websites that you are referencing.
Yes, and that's not the only ones. There are dozens of YouTube channels where you can get lots of free information. As I say a lot, I focus in Eastern Europe, Russian in particular, and also Japanese and Chinese. But if say you have a Spanish accents like Costa Rican, Brazil, sorry, Brazil's not Spanish, but if you have like Spanish accents problems, I'm sure there's someone on YouTube who specializes in your issues who would give you direct feedback on that. So,
okay,
plenty of free material to get started.
Okay, so I know if I'm Tutor Joe and he is looking for specific advice, and you made some reference to it, what I'd like to do is for Tutor Joe and everyone else, and on your free Thinkific course, How to Speak Like a Native in 3 Weeks, anyone who sees something that says speak like a native speaker in 3 weeks, I would like to speak better in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What are some of the things for Tutor Joe and others in which they can apply those? What does that mean to speak like a native in 3 weeks? And for teachers, and I think whether it's Tutor Joe or anyone else, how can I take some of the concepts that you shared so far into their classrooms, whether it be, you know, small tidbits of teaching tips, improvisation, drama? What are some of the keys to accent training and your own instructional approach?
Okay, great question. So let's, I guess, start with what does that mean to fix? What does fix mean, and what does 3 weeks mean? So what I set out to accomplish with that mini course, which is free, it's available because I want more people to understand this material.
And just so you know, Peter, for those that are wondering, again, the link to that free course is in the show notes on Facebook, where you can look at that. It'll also be on YouTube later, so they can find that course easily. So yeah, talk about what does it mean, speak like a native in 3 weeks?
So the 3 weeks is you will reset your vocal posture in 3 weeks. So 3 weeks is how long it takes to make a habit. It actually has to do with your emotional responses in the brain. So if you do something every day for 3 weeks, it starts to feel normal to your brain. And when something feels normal, it's natural. So that's the 3 weeks. And in the video course, it's basically 5 videos, and it breaks down everything you probably don't know about vocal posture that you need to know to actually train it. So basically video 1 is what is vocal posture. 2 is how do you open up your articulants? How do you open up these muscles so you can train them better?
Okay.
Number 3 is how do you open up your formants? How do you open up your vocal tract? Okay. And then it's how do you actually reset your vocal posture? Now, to teach a little bit of it right now, one of the ways to discover your vocal posture is to make what we call a hesitation sound. Basically, like imagine you're thinking, and then you understand what is your body doing when you just say, So in my body, I'm very loose, and I can feel in myself, the only tightness is right here in my lower jaw. Let's contrast that with, this might be more British. They have a very more tense and longness in their face. I'm not sure how I feel about that, right? Now, I don't do accents, but I can talk with a different vocal posture where my face is just tighter and longer, and it changes how I do everything. Whereas when I come back here, this is how I usually speak because I have less tension up here and I keep the resonance more down here. So anyway, what you want to do is one is find the more American vocal posture, which is loose. And then, as we mentioned earlier, you want to train your tongue to go hit those vowels from your neutral position. So you basically go like this: e, 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 i, and you go around the mouth to hit all the vowels. So what you're doing is calibrating to the vocal posture and then finding the sound from your neutral position, right? Okay. So when you do this as a whole, you're resetting your core vowel formations, okay? And if you do it for 3 weeks, you reset what feels normal to your body, which is huge. Now, of course, I want to say, fix your accent in 3 weeks. You're not going to sound like Barack Obama in 3 weeks. You're not going to sound like Larry King in 3 weeks. You're not going to be perfect. You're not going to have everything done. But what it will do is reset yourself to a stronger foundation.
Great. I like those ideas of, I don't think those are areas in which we focus of like retraining ourselves, developing a greater and deeper self-awareness. As you mentioned, and you mentioned that you're focusing on North American English, but people might want to reset their vocal posture to another accent if they so desire.
Absolutely. I don't recommend it because America, come on, America, guys, let's do it. But no, it's really, you can do this for any language. There's actually a very good app. It is paid, so it's not free, but you can actually download the format exercises for any dialect. They have like New York English, New Jersey English, Connecticut English. They have Northern English, Southern English, Welsh, Irish. Like they have every dialect. And for like $5, you can download tracks to train any format. It's a very cool, it's called the Accent Kit. I didn't put it on the link because it's not free, but yeah, you can do this for any accent. And it's how actors train, by the way.
And I think, just so you know, Yefe from Brazil mentions, speaking like a native in only 3 weeks is impossible. I'm sorry, but that's what I think about it. And I think what you're speaking is one realm of trying to prepare yourself for a better speech posture. Because the same thing I think many people would question is, to what degree can you make that change in 3 weeks? And I think you've tried to highlight one aspect which that can happen.
Yes. First of all, let's be realistic. There is no magic pill. If you hear that and you think it's a magic pill, it's not. It's about resetting your vocal posture. But it also goes straight back to the mindset. If you think it's impossible, it's impossible. If you think it's possible, well, believe me, I've seen it. People can completely, you'll be blown away. There's one student in particular I'm thinking about, this guy, Alex from Russia. He was on YouTube. He came to me because he wanted to make better, more native sounding YouTube videos. Yeah. And in 16 days, he went from, hello, my name is Alexei. I'm stereotyping a little bit. Yeah. I can't do accents, but you'll see before and after, and that just took 16 days. So,
yeah. And I get, like I said, always. Yeah, I would say the same thing with Hefe. If he's talking about speaking like a native in 3 weeks, really impossible in all aspects of what we want to do. Yeah. I think there's certain elements that could be retrained, but I understand how people might, question that. And I don't think we're making a blanket statement to any degree. I think we're saying there's certain things that you can do that can lead to better speaking long-term.
Absolutely.
And yeah. Layla says, when you love any language, you find ways to learn faster, all about it. Self-teaching is the best way. And I agree with that. Thank you, Layla. So let's, with a few final ideas. So what are some of the benefits of accent reduction? And do we really want to eliminate accent? Is that really the goal? Should it be the goal?
It's a great question. There's two sides of this, as always. I would say you want to be a unique individual. If If your accent is so strong that it's causing people to put you in a box, if they can instantly tell where you're from, you probably want to reduce your accent. You want to be meeting people as yourself, not as a member of a culture. Then number two is there's also some jobs where you really want to be sure that you're speaking with a pretty neutral accent or a more native accent. That's call centers, sales jobs in particular. And let's say you want to give a major speech, maybe you're giving a TED talk, or maybe you're doing some YouTube videos. You want to make sure you're talking in a way where most of your listeners are accustomed to your accent, where they view it as clear. And also, let's just be frank, we do tend to view native speakers as authority figures. It's neither right nor wrong. It's just a reality of the world we live in. And you can ignore that, and that's okay. Or you can decide it's what you want and say that you want to fix it. So that's always been my view of it.
And I think if we fully acknowledge that there's a certain level of implicit bias inside of us, where we recognize that we have a preference, whether we acknowledge it or not, of certain accents over others. It shouldn't be that way. It should be, that we honor and respect all accents equally. And I think what you just mentioned is trying to develop maybe a neutral accent should be one goal for some people. But I think, if I think of Arnold Schwarzenegger, if you take away his accent, it's not the same. So again, in terms of educational opportunities and career paths, I think there can be certain goals that we want to achieve that are related to that. Violetta says, learning a language is loving the language. It is not impossible if you're determined to learn it. And so, I think there are certain things that are certainly possible. I would go back, and even in my experience where, boy, I wish I could, eliminate my accent in 3 weeks in Spanish. I realize for me that might not be possible, might not always be realistic, but we're talking about certain areas, at least in the initial stages of retraining the brain, that will lead to greater production and change later on. Let us talk, again, teachers, feel free to share some of the things that you're doing in the classroom. I want to make one last idea related to this. In what ways can drama or improvisation or role plays be a part of that training, whether teachers are working in face-to-face environments or on teaching online classes? What is the role of some of those basic ideas?
I think there should be a part of every classroom. I'm very biased because it's my love. One of the huge reason that I think it's needed is that you teach people, you break a pattern in the brain, right? Like, you don't want to be teaching people and have them only able to speak English when they're talking to you. That completely defeats the purpose. So as soon as you say, okay, guys, we're doing a role play now, right? We're in a scene. It teaches the brain you're not in the classroom anymore, right? And the brain cannot differentiate between a visualized experience and an actual experience. This is why visualization has become such a phenomenon in the business world, is because when you see something happening, your brain thinks you're there. It doesn't differentiate. So let's say you have a student and they're preparing to do an interview. Well, do a role play in the interview. Have them dress up, have them set up the room or your Zoom meeting so that it looks and feels like an interview, and practice it, because that gets rid of that initial anxiety, that initial nerves, jitters, as we say in America, jitters. So I think everyone should be doing this, really try and put students in a role play. Now, in the classroom experience, you can move the chairs around, you can set up an environment. Online, it can be a little trickier, but it also can go to your advantage because you can record it. And there's a very powerful thing which happens when students see themselves speaking English, because they start to understand they're not as bad as they think they are. Right. Because students always think they're worse than they actually are, always.
Great.
So I record my students habitually. I have them give themselves feedback, and I work again with the mind. I work with their inner narrative of how they can actually treat themselves nicer, give themselves more slack, and you can do it too. Pretty much every Skype, Zoom, they all have recording features you can use with this, which I highly recommend.
Great. One of the final questions I'd like to address in topics, many teachers are still constantly struggling to find their place in this new pandemic era. What the future may bring, we really don't know. But let me ask, what has been the pandemic been on your own work, and how are some of the experiences that you have had similar perhaps to other teachers, and how can they find hope in their own online teaching?
Mm-hmm. I'm very lucky because the pandemic actually made my work a lot easier because I was prepared for it. What the big thing it's done is it's reduced any stigma. It's reduced any sort of barrier for people to look for help online. So now, I think before the pandemic, at least for me, my goal with the internet was to never spend any money, right? I would go on the internet, and if I didn't spend any money, it was a good day. And now people have realized that they are actively looking for services online. That barrier has been crossed forever. So you're no longer dealing with people's just anxiety about paying a stranger on the internet. That's completely gone away. So I was very lucky. I was already working online, and all of a sudden some very high status people were looking, and I happened to work with them, which increased my confidence phenomenally. So I want to really focus on that part of this. Advice for you if you're struggling with transitioning is look to break psychological barriers. Look to just chip away, right? If you've never made money through the internet, just go on Preply, make your first dollar, right? As soon as you start to understand that you can be on the receiving end through this, your whole psychology will change and you'll start looking for those opportunities. I firmly believe that it's never been easier to find students online. You just need to believe it's possible and have the right frameworks. And on the teaching side, there's plenty of frameworks to help you get students as well. And if you're interested just to chat with me and give you some ideas for that, I'm also happy to do that. If you can find my contact information on that site in the comments.
Great. And one of the things that I would also, this is a comment that has come from Mirtha, and perhaps you could reach out to her because this is something that could be addressed in a longer conversation. What are the areas of reducing and eliminating an accent? Is it creating a clear listening awareness of the pronunciation first? That I think you were talking about posturing could be one of those elements. Is it working on the physical and mechanics of tongue, placement, jaw movement? Is it identifying the brain patterns? What's first? What could you speak to that?
This is an amazing question. What's first is understanding that you can work just with the body without the mind, right? If you can just say, hey, student, Angela, right? Just stick your tongue against your teeth and make that sound. There's your I. Now move your tongue up. Right? And as soon as you can divorce the mind from the work itself, that's step one, because you can't think and change your accent. It just doesn't work. So you have to start to become aware of how you can work just with the body. And when you do that, what you can do is start to mimic, right? So a lot of what I do is I just go like, ah. And if the student is trained to not think and just copy, this is highly effective because they just learn like their children again to copy my posture if they're ready to do that. So you want to start to understand the vowel chart. You want to understand how the tongue affects the sound. And if you can just move your tongue around your mouth and find those sounds in your mouth, then you're going to be calm enough to start to actually play with other things. I hope
Great.
that makes sense, right?
Yeah, and I want to read a couple of comments that are coming on. Hefte from Brazil, he was the one that was really questioning whether, you can learn to speak like a native in 3 weeks. And I think these are valid points. And I want to read some of his comment. He says, I respect every opinion. He says, I'm going to read it. It's a little bit large on the screen, but he says, and speaking my mind, which I think that's what we encourage. Trying to sound like a native in a short time is just a waste of time. Unless you spend years and years abroad, you will never be able to speak like a native. You can speak English fluently, but not like a native. There's more than practice to speaking like a native. And I think this is a really good question and certainly we could explore this more, but in 3 weeks, there are certain limitations to what you can do. And I think as a teacher, I've been teaching for 30 years, and I realize that there's certain things that you can and cannot do within that period. And I think, once again, Peter, I think you're trying to address a certain area which can be addressed to that degree. Victor mentions from Mexico, says determination is definitely key. When I was in 7th grade, I heard a 9th grader speak fabulous English, and I thought to myself, I want to speak like her. So those 10 seconds impacted my life greatly and worked on acquiring an American accent, but it requires a lot of listening, paying attention to the subtle sound, and a lot of practice. And I think I would agree that with Victor talking about speaking like an American, I think for me, it's whatever accent that you really want to achieve, whether it's British, Australian, whatever your goal might be, I think is what we're trying to encourage as well. And then Precious says, most Filipinos speak English more confidently with foreigners or with native. I'm sorry?
Sorry to cut you off. This is amazing. This is huge.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Native speakers then with fellow Filipinos. Most of us think that our fellow citizens will criticize pronunciation, diction, accent, and grammar. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes. Oh my God. This is my pet peeve. Pet peeve is something frustrating to me. This is the number one belief I have to work through with people is your criticism will mostly come from your family and friends and fellow natives. There's lots of reasons for this, but as I said with the mindset before, the growth mindset is key. Native speakers are kind, patient, and forgiving. Your own culture is usually very demanding, very critical, and very, shall we say, unsupportive sometimes. I don't exactly know why it is, but I've worked with a lot of people who live in New York who are of Nepalese, Indian, and Bangladeshi descent. And they always say that it's sort of such a source of pride amongst their friends who speaks the best English that it becomes just another thing you tease each other about and you bully each other. And getting through that emotional pain can be a very big obstacle. It goes back to this complete underlying thread of this whole conversation. It's your mindset. It's what are you committed to, right? When I think it was Victor who wrote about getting that energy, right? He was committed to changing, and he did. And other people are committed to not changing, and they don't change. It's the amazing power of the human spirit to get a job done when you embrace it. When you truly believe it, you can accomplish anything.
And I appreciate that. And Yefe says, I will try to talk less than I'm doing. No, we like that conversation. Yes. For me personally, do I think you can speak like a native speaker in 3 weeks? No, in the sense that I think you can certainly develop a deeper awareness for the direction that you need to go. It was what I might feel. And maybe that's what Yefe is saying as well. Mesa saying, I think learning a certain accent can be done by imitating the way of pronunciation. A lot of my students are excellent on that because they are continuously listening to different accents. Some use British, American, Australian, thanks to the internet. And I agree with someone who said that learning a language is a matter of passion. I think is important. Mirtha says, I encourage students to use a mirror when practicing pronunciation. I liken the exercise to a ballet student or a karate practitioner, creating muscle memory. Maybe when I think about some of the ideas that you're suggesting, Peter, the idea of muscle memory and that 3 weeks of posturing is maybe what you're referring to in that development.
Yeah. So just if you don't mind me cutting in for a second.
No problem.
Not like you do work for 3 weeks and you never do work ever again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, exactly. Bro, you put the muscle memory in yourself in 3 weeks and then you just practice, right?
Right.
And one word about mirror work. Mirror work can be very powerful. Just again, make sure your students are emotionally taking care of themselves. If you find them getting frustrated, like if they're looking in a mirror and they're like, I should have done that better, right? You have to help their mindset. It's like, I actually cover this a lot. It's called affirmations. A very powerful affirmation is, I am safe to fix my accent.
Yeah, good point.
I am safe. I am fixing my accent. I'm choosing to fix my accent. I will fix my accent. Affirmation work combined with this can be very powerful. If you find your students, especially with mirror work, judging themselves, please intervene, because that will actually make the problem worse. If they're giving themselves negative emotional energy, that can actually go backwards. So just do mirror work. Just make sure that you're training them how to give themselves love as they're doing mirror work.
Self-compassion, I think, is really key.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great.
Big topic.
Right. And Javier says, amazing talking. I really love your accents. Well, let's go ahead. Again, we thank everyone for joining the episode. Peter, any final comments?
Yeah, just keep up the good work, guys. Mindset is everything. The opportunities out there right now are so amazing. I know it's difficult. If you're coming from a culture where you don't even have internet, I know that can be very frustrating and seem like it's impossible, but there's a tool for everything these days. Just keep a positive mindset and keep looking and keep doing 1% every day, and you'll get there. I promise you. So keep it up.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Peter, for joining us today. Again, in the show notes on Facebook, you'll find several links to which Peter is referring. And also, again, I'm sure this is a longer discussion on a variety of things that could be discussed regarding pronunciation. I think the ideas of talking about mindset, about posturing. Also, Mirtha says, I love the idea of using affirmations as a part of an instructor's role. I think it's really key because sometimes, Peter, I think you've really highlighted some great points that we often don't discuss. We're always so focused on, okay, vowel sounds and consonants and suprasegmentals and intonation, where these other elements of posturing and mindset just never permeate into the language classroom. And I really appreciate you taking the time to, highlighting some of those aspects that really are not addressed to the degree I think they should be.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, we want to thank all of you for joining the broadcast today. Again, your voices make this broadcast what it is. Again, have a wonderful day and an even better tomorrow. And again, feel free to participate in the Facebook, sharing additional comments that you might want to. Also, Victor mentions, what was the name of that app for accents?
That is the Accent Kit.
Okay.
And that's the one where everything's $5. So
Accent Kit. Thank you, Victor, for asking the Accent Kit. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day and an even better tomorrow. Until the next episode.